So the other day in my morning newspaper, the Chronicle, it came with this wrapped around it. The end times, the world ends May 31st. So we kind of missed it. It turns out it's a movie, right? But I thought it was very striking considering that we were putting this together. When we had a few earlier meetings to talk about starting the Resilience Project, one of the people we heard, obviously, was Nate, and Michael and I agreed right from that day he's our guy to bring here and do that talk, and you saw why, to distill so much down. And then we were talking some more. Who else should we have? And there were a bunch of names, but one was Joanna Macy, who lives over in Berkeley. And we thought, well, wouldn't that be great if we could get her? And lucky for me, about 20 years ago, when I was in a very dark place, basically PTSD from about 15 years of working in the HIV epidemic in San Francisco, and always having had an apocalyptic mindset about the future, to the degree that, as mentioned earlier, it was a big part of my decision not to have children. I saw that there was a retreat over the hill here at Spirit Rock, which is a Buddhist retreat place, and I'd never done one of these, and it was almost a week long, I think 5 days and 6 nights, with Joanna Macy. And it was titled, one of the titles of her landmark book, which is World as Lover, World as Self. It was put together for activists, basically, as opposed to just a pure sitting type retreat. And I signed up. Okay, I'll commit, I'll go to this. Although I wasn't quite committed because I drove out and I still had my mountain bike on the roof and my surfboard. Because I say, if this is really boring or cheesy, I'm out of here. The end of it, I didn't want it to end because it was so engaging and she was so amazingly impressive to me on a scientific level, on a spiritual level, and just on a personal level. So we have remained and become friends ever since then. And last year we had her here. She filled this room for a discussion that you can see on the New School Commonweal website, if you wish. So we asked her if she would come today, and she graciously said yes. So I'm going to get out of her way. We asked her to speak here. I think many of you, most of you know who she is, but really one of the pioneers in talking about just the questions we're talking about today, even before a lot of the big reports on climate came out, etc. That's one of her books. Her newest one, I believe it's newest, is Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, right? And her autobiography, I commend to you highly too. It's called Widening Circles, and it's a story of a life that is just amazing to read. Everything from working for the CIA to becoming who she is now. And I will just add, she's also an esteemed translator of Rilke. So there are books like this too. I recommend these to you. They definitely have a bearing, excuse me, on what we are talking about today. So please welcome the one and only Dr. Joanna Macy.
I am so excited to be with an audience of people who are not afraid to hear about what's happening to their world. So I could talk all day, but I'm not going to. I want to just say that in 1977, that is 42 years ago, I went to the Boston Coliseum with my two of my teenage children. I had just completed a PhD on thesis on systems theory and Buddhist teachings, and looking forward to an academic career. It would be a late starting career since I was already in my late 40s, but at any rate, the Cousteau Society was putting on an incredible day on the threats to the biosphere. And on every level of the Coliseum, there were booths and displays, panels, and rooms with people discussions and lectures on absolutely every aspect of what we're doing, not just the ocean, though Jacques-Yves Cousteau was there himself and shared his deep concern about the disappearance of the plankton as important to our oxygen as the forests are. And he was very, very discouraged and discouraging about that. I was familiar with almost all the information. And I took notes, and I said, well, yeah, because my family and I had been very involved in the macroanalysis seminars from the Movement for a New Society that we'd been leading. But something happened to me at the end of that day where something I saw, and you can ask me later, but it's like all the information that I had, which was up here, some pins were pulled out, and it all cascaded down through every part of my body, heart, gut. And I heard myself say, we are destroying our world. And I knew that in a way that was beyond discussion, because I'd been living with the data for previous decades. I went into a dark night of the soul for about 15 months because I didn't have anybody I could talk to about it, compare the symptoms, how it feels. For one, I wanted to protect my family. I didn't want them to know what I was going through. And my peers, my academic in the Department of Religion, wouldn't you think? Avoidance, patronizing. Surely, Joanna, you're not thinking that all consciousness in the universe is in this one planet? It's the planet we have. It's the planet we know. It's the planet we are. So at any rate, I was what brought me out was Ralph Nader's critical mass focus organization, and a group of us I joined a group in a lawsuit against a nuclear power plant to windward of Washington to try to stop them from racking the fuel rods too close together the regulations permitted, and brings them close to criticality. And the defeat of that, but it didn't matter whether it won or not, I had this information that I wanted to tell people. It was about the health effects. That was what I was supposed to look up. I went right to the Nuclear Regulatory Committee. No one wanted to hear it. We're not surprised. How do you bring it up? By the way, did you know? Let me talk to you about. Have you ever thought? And so that I became so fascinated by the phenomenon of denial, the phenomenon of repressing the negative emotions about our world. And it wouldn't leave me. So I thought, and then I thought, well, there is Buddha nature in us all. There is what Thich Nhat Hanh, that wonderful Zen master, said to those who said, what should we do to help our world? And he said, the most important thing to do is to hear the sounds of the earth crying in your heart. What a statement. As if the sounds of the earth crying were inside me. But then I thought, well, that's a natural thing to say, given what I've learned about systems and about the Buddha Dharma. So I began gathering people together for the purpose, and I'd been teaching meditation too, so I started there, walking around pain. What's it like to feel physical and mental and moral pain? How do we speak? And I got it right away that what people needed was not me telling them anything, was not me being a Paul Revere about the condition of the world, but to invite them, create a situation in which they could speak. And I found that open sentences, for starters, was great. Much better than a question like, what do you think? How do you feel? Give them an open sentence. When I faced the collapse of our society, I feel. Now you just repeat after me and end that sentence. All right. Well, when I face the collapse of society, and then it starts. So it's like the open sentence is a kind of slide that you go down and into. And then pretty soon, it feels so good to hear from parts of yourself that you had been shutting up in an inner closet. And I was just telling Steve that, or maybe at any rate, I think it was Steve, but in those early years, the rate of people who fell in love with each other at my workshops, I would. So it's, if you're looking for some romance, this is. And so I found another. I began to realize that we were tapping not only repressed emotions, but what they could bridge to, which was the realm of moral imagination. And I think many of us here this morning were speaking from that. How do we imagine that we can live up to this, be this great simplification? This book I brought along to show you. It's from, in France last year, Une autre fin du monde est possible. Another end of the world is possible, where they are looking, and the great young Pablo Servigne and others are doing beautiful work publicly, and with young people flocking to talking about collapse, and even developing a school of thought, which they call collapsology. Yes. So that we began to see, we were playing around, but that we were following a plot line in a given workshop, whether it was a day or a half a day or a weekend or a week, that was in the form of a cycle or a wheel, but it's like more like a spiral, because it could go around, where you begin with where all the great spiritual traditions begin, with gratitude. Because what this world asks of us more than anything else, not our smarts, not our saintliness, not our superego, but our gratitude, our full presence, to show up however we are. If we just be present, and a tool for that is gratitude. Even if you're saying, now the spices I love, or the weather I love, or the look in the eyes of old men that I love, anything, to list and that helps you get out of, you can't experience gratitude and feel defended against painful information, can you? And that grounds you. Also, what I liked about gratitude always, as I discovered, was that gratitude is independent of external circumstances. The indigenous people know that, especially those in this country. Their great Thanksgiving. Whatever's going on, don't we? That's the moment for gratitude, and it's there. And also, gratitude is a revolutionary act. And if you believe, as I do, that the corporate capitalism and the consumer society has a lot to do with the breakdown of our natural systems in this, gratitude is wonderful, because it frees you from the neediness that is required to be subjected, to be a part, the self-loathing even that's required and engendered by the consumer society. If you don't get this connections right away, you will in a minute. What I noticed within the first year or so, to my surprise, is that, oh, wait a minute, I didn't tell you the rest of the spiral. So there's gratitude, and then we go into honoring our pain for the world. We don't try to explain it. We don't diagnose it. We don't try to excuse it. We don't dress it up in other clothes. We don't sit on it. We respect it. We honor it for what it is. The heart is breaking. It hurts to see. It's awful to feel. I don't want to know. Tell me all the things you don't want to know. That's a great exercise. And that what happens, I discovered. So this was a whole process of discovery for me, because nobody else I knew was doing this. And so never be afraid to invent new things. And I've found that the pain for the world would certainly include outrage and anger, certainly include sorrow, great grief, dread and fear, and also deprivation and failure and powerlessness. And so to speak this in open sentences is fine, but the best is through ritual. And there's some forms of ritual. In a ritual, you can speak for the whole. And the definitions and the conventions around that make it a ritual is that your sense you're speaking for the whole. It's in an archetypal voice from this moment. And actually, it's beautiful how the language sometimes that is so suitably prophetic and poetic and deep. And then they say that you're suffering with the world. That's what we do. That's what all this equipment is in our heart, minds, and fingertips and our neurology. We suffer with our world, just like the way we love our world. And the literal meaning of suffering with is compassion. You're a compassionate one. We're born, that's our equipment. That's the definition of a bodhisattva. So we reframe just feeling the pain so that you can, and understanding it. And then being liberated from being anchored in a separate self. So this, I found that the sequestration of the self in 5 centuries of hyper-individualism of the Western culture, which is being broadcast, through or taken globally through our global economy, is a cruel thing for us all, that we put so much of our sense of what and who we are into this little prison cell of the ego, or as one of my teachers, James Hillman, the Jungian psychologist, talked about it as the lonely cowboy ego. And we could, in order to be real in our times and take in what's happening to our world, there's this, not as it should, but it seems to happen naturally, that the world becomes your larger body, that you are a living body within the living body of Earth. And you are in conversation with it, but you are also in Earth's hands. And that there are all kinds of spiritual ways of being able to express that. And then the next part of the plot line is seeing with new eyes, where you can begin largely through role plays to play around with deep ecology and deep time. And deep ecology, which we drew a lot from the deep long-range ecology movement of decades back, has the notion that as we mature as a self, we grow our ecological self, which is you, who you indisputably, preciously, not like any other, but you're held in this larger body that lets you display your uniqueness and act your responsibility of participation. Choice. I feel that at the core of all that I've learned and have worked with, what's guided me over the last 42 years of this is from the beginning, from systems and Dharma, it's where they come together, it's where you find the self is always changing. And if you're looking for it, it's in the act of choice making, in decision making, in what you want and choose and act on. And that this can help you to the moment where you are in the present, where not yesterday and not tomorrow, where you can be with this unfolding drama of this beautiful planet. And then the story, then you can see the story you're acting, and you can choose. There are three major things happening at the same time. One is the industrial growth society. And those are mostly what you hear people talking about in the great institutions, in the government and the media and the military. And then there's another story, and we call it the great unraveling. So we have been working for this 4 decades with the sense, and that's sort of built into the limits to growth, which goes back to 1970, with the fact that we have the data to show that the web of life is unraveling. And the third choice is, of what's happening, is that there is a transition. There is the great turning to a life-sustaining society. We don't call it sustainable. That's a tricky word. Life-sustaining. And that we can find our way into that exciting drama. That's our choice we can make again and again. Thank you for listening.
Joanna, I want to ask you a question. If we were to spend a little time as a follow-up to this with one of those open sentences, just to explore together, what is the sentence that you would choose for today for us to work with for a little while?
I have it.
Okay.
But I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
Because you're going to do it.
We're going to do it.
You want to participate? You want me to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But tell us what the sentence is, and
No.
then. Oh, you won't.
I don't need it that way. You have to get into a pair. And once you're sitting facing each
It's
other,
a pair thing. Okay. So we'll try that. What is the sentence?
I'm not going to tell you.
All right. Good. All right. Thank you.
Please sit down
I will.
facing someone.
I will. I'll face you.
All right. I'd like you all to stand up. Grab your chair, move it so that it's facing someone else. Let's try with someone you don't know. That's been suggested. I don't have a bell, so I'll ding. All right, we're going to do an open sentence or two. And at first I ask you to quickly tap your partner on the knee. And the first tapper is partner A, and the other is partner B. And so what I am going to ask you to do is to, one after the other, starting with partner A, repeat first part of an open sentence that I will give you, and then just continue it. And so the key to the effectiveness of this for yourself and the interest for your partner, of course, is to avoid generalities and abstractions. So if I were to say to you, the question is, for breakfast I had this morning, and you were to say, for breakfast I had some food, that'd be so boring. So we don't want to do this with the open sentences. We want to let the actual particularities of life enliven yourself and the other. Okay? Okay, partner A, ready? As I face the collapse of our civilization, what I feel grateful for is, as I face the collapse of our society, what I feel grateful for is. Ding! Thank you. Okay, now partner B, it's your turn. Oh, you can hear this retroactively. Okay. So partner B, it's your turn. When I face the collapse of our whole culture, what I am grateful for is. Thank you very much. Now there's I have made room for a second open sentence, and this time we will begin with partner B. As I face the collapse of our culture, as I face the collapse of our civilization, what breaks my heart is, as we're facing the collapse, as we face the collapse of our society, what breaks my heart is. Thank you. And now let's give partner A a chance. As I face the collapse of this civilization, what breaks my heart is. Thank you very much, and take time to thank your partner. First of all, I want you to remember or know that the heart that breaks open can hold the whole universe. It's that big. It is in this precious present moment that we can feel the vitality and presence, the full presence of ourself in this world. Again and again and again. Now there are a couple of things I wanted to call your attention to. I have found that there's a book on collapse that's helpful called Reinventing Collapse by Dmitry Orlov. He had lived through the collapse of the political economy in Russia between roughly 1988 and 95. there was not a ecological devastation so much as, of course, an economic one. But it went through the bottom falling out of people's lives, their money meaning nothing, their rank meaning nothing, and how they got by and what they learned. And he writes, he's part American because he became an American citizen when he came to visit here in the early 90s. Then he's back and forth. So there's that, reinventing collapse. And that's sort of interesting exercises like something as simple as reflecting in your life of determining what's a necessity and what's a convenience. Looking around my home, which seems pretty simple, but then I think of when you get down to it, there are really three things we need to stay alive: air, water, food. And the ways you reconfigure for yourself the productivity of your life. Richard Heinberg's book, Afterburn, where, and particularly what I love about this book is very few people talk about it, but he calls it a chapter on our evanescent culture. And he's looking at how dependent, and I haven't seen this in any comments so far today or heard it, but we're electricity dependent. And not only so, okay, well, the lights go out, they go out. And our ancestors up just a few generations ago, they didn't have electricity. No, we can just adjust back. For many reasons. And there's one he goes into here, which is the loss of our knowledge through digitalization. So much of what we need, even on a daily basis, for how to treat an infection or measles or has been digitalized and so convenient. So much of the history and geography of our planet has been in the laptop. Our youth and our school students they don't need to remember anything. So is this going to be, he describes this. Thank you, Richard. He describes this in a way that very few people are, the trap we've set for ourselves by digitalizing so much of our knowledge. And then there was reference made to Jem Bendell, who is the professor at Cumbria University in the UK, that wrote just 10 months ago this paper where he had been a professor of sustainability, leadership, and he'd taken a year off to look at climate change, and he came out realizing that everything he'd been teaching wouldn't be, most everything he was teaching wouldn't be really applicable. And he had the courage, and he described it recently. It was on when he was giving a talk in Australia, and for weeks beforehand, he was wondering if he dared, do I dare say this? I'm going to be ruined. And then he found, after he gave this talk, which became his paper called Deep Adaptation, that there were clusters of people coming up to him and said, "Oh, thank you for saying that," or "I've been feeling that." What I have found particularly helpful are the 4 R's that he proposes. And I just did a day-long workshop in Oakland in an urban farm and its population, where we went through these 4 R's, but interactively. And I'll tell you what they are, but you'll see them online. The first R is resilience, and he defines that as what are the values and what are the behaviors that we have and want to hang on to. And I'm so familiar with these 4, I'll tell you the other 3, but I was startled that when in the workshop what we did was we had everybody, we were about 20 only, 20, 25. We counted out by fours and had all the ones and twos meet separately. So you'd meet in a group with a separate one of these. So you'd be in a group with this resilience. And they were mostly in their 20s and 30s, but just popping ideas. And it was a tonic. Yes, we can make it. It was so wonderful. All right, that's the first one, is what do we need to, what do we already have that we want to be sure to keep and use? The second R is relinquishment. I just love the way that sounds. It makes it sound so silky. It's just letting go. What are the values and behaviors we need to let go of, and expectations? My group, you want to know, was the third R, which is, I call it restoration. What are the values and habits and behaviors that we our kind used to have? What do we want to go back and bring forward from the past? And it was fun doing that with this young people from different colors and cultures there. And what was coming up, and it all seemed so inviting. And then the fourth, so when his first paper came out, there were those three. But as he lived with this, and this has been a huge roller coaster for him too, and he has stayed with this. This then came this one, which is a wonderful question for us. Now I'll close with that. Reconciliation. What do we want to make peace with while we can? In our family, in our neighborhood, in our class, in our politics, in our species, in our work, in our community, in our internationally, globally. So I close with that, looking forward to the good times we'll have as we think more and more and feel in us the joys of the reconciliation that can come with this adventure upon us. Thank you.